Well, I'm Catherine Enck, Executive Director of MLA's Hire and Esquire, and today I am delighted to be speaking with Adam Rose, owner and partner of Rose Law Firm and a longtime Hire and Esquire user. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for the invitation to join you this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. So before we get started, I would love if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your law firm.
Great. So I've been a lawyer for 27 years. I would say that entire time I've been a corporate lawyer, but corporate lawyers do a lot of different things. And so there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of internal ownership succession, commercial transactions supporting those successful privately held companies, and oftentimes litigation if transactions don't solve the problem. So we kind of see ourselves as being legal solution providers for successful businesses.
Well, I really wanted to talk to you today just because at Hire and Esquire, we frequently work with small and mid-sized law firms, and we frequently see law firm partners and attorneys who are struggling with sort of the business side of running a law firm, which is obviously something that they don't teach in law school. And I think there are a lot of partners of smaller firms and mid-sized firms who kind of feel like they're out there on their own trying to figure out how to run the business side of a law firm. And I know you've been incredibly successful with yours. And so I wanted to hear from you just to start out with, what were some of the most helpful resources for you to hone your business skills when you started taking on more management responsibilities?
Boy, that's a big question. I think I kind of looked for assistance from lots of different places. So I remember joining a business owner peer networking group. So something kind of separate and outside of the practice of law, but just a place where business owners got together and shared tips and tricks on navigating the marketplace. So we'd talk about financing issues and finding a lease and how you navigate insurance considerations and how do you staff your firm. So as a law firm, I've got to find lawyers to work at the firm, but also paralegals and legal assistants. And ultimately, there's a lot to manage here. So trying to find a chief operating officer or an office manager has all been a big part of that puzzle. And then bookkeeping and accounting is another huge issue. So CPAs are really good at kind of doing tax returns once a year, but kind of look down at you if you don't know how to hand them a clean financial statement at the end of the year. But of course, I'm trained in the practice of law. I don't know how to create financial statements. And you would think that I could just hire a bookkeeping company to solve that problem. But we've had some tremendous challenges finding bookkeepers, accountants, financial professionals to create clean financial statements. So lots and lots of things that a business owner has to worry about that a lawyer has no idea are even part of their roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you sort of get connected with some of these groups? How were you able to find them? I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. They realize that an affinity group could probably be helpful, but they're kind of lost as to how to start. How did you find your way to affinity groups that you felt were helpful in learning more about these things?
Well, both within this question and then lots of other questions in terms of how do you run a firm, I think it's really helpful to know what kind of law firm you want to be. So, are you a business-oriented law firm? Are you a personal injury firm? Are you a boutique that's focused exclusively on one particular industry or one particular niche in the law? For us, we're industry agnostic, and our focus is we want to work with successful, closely held companies, typically those worth $10 to $50 million. And so when you've answered that question, which is what kind of law firm do you want to run, it starts to give you answers to lots of other questions that you might be asking. So if I want to get those kind of clients, I need to be networking with other people that are serving those clients. So I'm networking with commercial bankers, with CPAs, with wealth management advisors, with business valuation appraisers. Anyway, so all of that kind of networking gets you out and focused on your target client. And I just found that in that networking, I was then being targeted by other people that wanted me to come to their networking group, or a peer-to-peer counseling group that wanted me to be the lawyer in the group, or a group of professionals from a collection of professional services right on the geographic road where our office is located said, hey, let's get together once a month and share tips and tricks. So one way or another, once I had decided who my target audience was, I think some of these other resources found me.
That's great. That's wonderful advice. One other question I wanted to ask in terms of sort of helpful resources, have there been, books or authors, or is there anyone that sort of you look to, that you listen to, that has resources out there in the market that you think is really relevant for law firms?
So not law firms specific, but a couple of books really do come to mind, and authors. One is Gino Wickman, and he wrote the book Traction, and he's part of the EOS model. And I don't think that that's particularly focused on the legal industry, but I find that a lot of the way that he is able to simplify just running a business has been very helpful for me, sort of creating an expectation of what's the minimum entry level that I expect from every single person who works with us, and then how do I rate and evaluate who are the best skill set fits and also culture fits for our firm. So I really appreciate the work of Traction and EOS. And then I've also appreciated the work of Patrick Lencioni, and he has written a variety of books. But one thing that has really been resonated with me is the concept of looking for people that are humble, hungry, and smart. And so when I'm looking to bring people onto my team, I'm really looking for somebody that checks all three of those boxes. And I find that I really need all three of those boxes to be checked, and any one of them by themselves is not going to be a good fit for our firm.
Because we hear this feedback a lot, how do you prioritize and balance your strategy and your growth efforts, like marketing or intake, with the actual practice of law, the billable work that you need to do as an attorney? I think that's a struggle for a lot of partners of smaller law firms and mid-sized firms, where they really are still very involved in the practice of law, but they also need to be managing how the firm is being run. How do you find that a way to strike the right balance between those two?
This is a really challenging part, particularly when you're a very small firm. When you're a very small, very new firm, when there's just one person in your firm, you have to do everything. So you have to find the next client, you have to practice law, you have to empty the garbage can, you have to sign up the insurance and negotiate the lease. Every single one of those is a responsibility you have to navigate. One thing that I have done is decided very early on the type of firm I wanted to be and the size of firm that I wanted to be. So I knew that I didn't want to be a solo lawyer with no staff. I knew I wanted to be a small law firm, let's call it 3 to a dozen lawyers. That's kind of like my sweet spot. So when it was just me, I was very quickly looking to hire for that first associate. And shortly behind that, so I had only been in existence as a firm for 3 months. I already had one associate and one staff member.
Great.
But those early hires, you really have to emphasize that they are there to kind of do whatever needs to be done. And so at the same time as I'm screening for what is your skill set, your experience, your background, I'm also screening for how flexible are you? And are you willing to format your own documents? And are you willing to do paralegal work? And are you willing to help answer the phone when new clients are coming in? So really, I'm screening for flexibility as much as skill set in those early days. Now that we're established, right? So now that our firm has been in existence for 12 years, that's much less important to me. So now I might be looking for somebody that has a specific niche subject matter area of expertise. And I can promise you, when I'm looking for a highly qualified bankruptcy attorney, I don't care how good they are at marketing. But early days, you really do have to look for that. And even today, we do a lot of outsourcing of our administrative talent. looking for remote offshore talent. And I'm looking for international lawyers that are willing to be lawyer if that's what it takes, paralegal if that's what it takes, legal assistant if that's what it takes. We bill them out as paralegals. We don't hold them out as attorneys, but somebody that has legal training and is willing to be flexible, doing whatever it takes, even if that means formatting a document, means that I've got other people on my team to pick up the slack, right? To help do all of those tasks that you're talking about need to get done. And if somebody kind of has this sort of, I'm going to put blinders on and I only want to do one thing over and over all day long, I tell them to go work at a large law firm, not work for me.
I know that there's been a recent trend where there have been more law firms who are hiring COOs to help them manage more of the business side of their law practice. Obviously, for big law firms, that's more common, but we're actually seeing it for more mid-sized firms that even are, 10 attorneys, 20 attorneys in that range. What are your thoughts on having these business specific roles within law firms, and how do you see that impacting how law firms deliver legal services to their end clients?
I think it's an unavoidable reality. As I think back to how I perceived that law firms were run, 27 years ago when I began the practice of law, I think you saw individuals that began their career as a legal secretary and then progressed to paralegal. By the time they're in their late 40s, they find themselves as the office manager kind of by default because they have the historical knowledge about clients of the firm and, who the different partners are. But I think more and more managing law firms is getting to be a highly specialized area, and law firms are going to have no choice but to go out and get expertise of people that are making this a professional focus. Somebody at the law firm needs to be an expert on cybersecurity. Somebody needs to understand all of the software tools. Somebody needs to understand the different hiring models. Somebody needs to understand the difference between a remote workforce and an in-person workforce. Somebody has to manage complex insurance issues. The list could go on and on and on. And lawyers that don't have appropriate support in all of these complex areas are going to find themselves having to do those things themselves and losing out on a lot of time that could be used to create the very valuable billable hour. So I think that for individuals that build a career for themselves kind of as a COO, a chief operating officer for law firms, there's a huge opportunity in the marketplace. I certainly have found that I've needed that kind of support, and it's not yet quite the well-worn career path that I think it will get to and needs to be. I'll also say this is another use that I've given to your platform, right? So I've asked for all sorts of creative job descriptions on your platform. One of those is I'd like to find lawyers that no longer want to practice law but understand the business of law. And I've looked on the Hire an Esquire platform and had lots of applicants for lawyers that might want to fill a COO type slot. While we're at it, you also know that I've used your platform to look for stand-up comedians that could help me with my marketing. So a lawyer that can do both stand-up comedy and sort of bring their legal training to bear. I think lawyers, who are trained and experienced with a legal background can be good at doing a lot of different jobs, not just the practice of law.
Well, that's great. The other question I wanted to ask you about was about alternative fee arrangements. I think that was, it was something that was being talked about a lot in the legal industry maybe 5 years ago, where I think there was a significant movement where people thought alternative fee arrangements were really going to muscle out the billable hour. I don't think it happened quite as dramatically as people anticipated that it would. But we do see a lot of legal departments trying to get increasingly creative with how they manage costs and how they put pressure on their law firms to manage costs. Having personally been on both sides of alternative fee arrangements, I would love to hear your thoughts on, what are the appropriate use cases and how do you make them successful?
So I also tried to figure out how to do this, 5 to 10 years ago. How do we make alternate fee arrangements work? ultimately concluded that for a practice like mine, where we focus on solving complex problems for successful businesses, we are inherently saying we're going to take your custom problem and we're going to help you find a custom solution. And if there was ever a situation where alternative fee arrangements do not make sense, it's with our business model. Because how can we homogenize the way that we're delivering service when we say you have a custom problem and we have a custom solution? So it really doesn't work for most of the work that we do. I think that the way and place that alternative fee arrangements can work is when you're doing something similar over and over again. So estate planning or residential tenant, or maybe some aspects of family law, or anywhere where you have the same thing predictably happening over and over is an opportunity for an alternative fee arrangement. I've already talked about AI a lot, but here's my prediction. I think that curiously, the existence of AI is not going to change the fundamental dynamic that I've just described about how alternative fee arrangement only work in some situations, but it's going to expand the areas in which an alternative fee arrangement might be able to work. Why? Because if you use AI successfully, you can be so much more effective. So I talked to my team. My team was initially very reluctant to use artificial intelligence. Adam, why are you making us use something that's going to make us, 5, 7, 10 times faster? Doesn't that just hurt us as a professional that sells our time by the billable hour? And I say no. I think it's going to make you more effective, more efficient, and help you produce a better quality product. So do the task that you can use artificial intelligence for. Do it 5 to 6 times as quickly as you would otherwise do it before, and then go back and do all of those extra things that you knew you should have done before and never did. Read the document through the second or the third time. Make sure your definitions are tied out. Make sure your cross-references are thought through. Make sure you're thinking strategically about how you're using this document relative to all the other documents. So do all of those other best practice tactics and techniques that you should have been doing before. You couldn't convince your clients to pay you to do, and now you have a surplus of time. You can provide a better quality product at the same price.
So one other question I wanted to ask you, because I think this is really relevant right now and interesting, is just what's your perspective and what are your thoughts on how can AI help make law firms more efficient? Do you think that that's a technology that small and mid-sized firms should be thinking about implementing strategically? Is it too soon? What are your thoughts on that?
Boy, I've got strong thoughts on this. So I think artificial intelligence is going to change the world. It's going to change every industry, but particularly white collar industries. And I think that lawyers that sort of drag their feet on getting on board with this are going to be left behind in the same way that lawyers that refuse to give up their dictaphone and start learning the computer are going to get left behind. I think it's that substantial and that significant. But just like any new technology, you've got to be smart about it. And artificial intelligence comes with some risks. There are confidentiality concerns, there's accuracy concerns. So you have to learn about the tool you're using and you have to use it in an intelligent way. But my goodness, I think that artificial intelligence within a lot of different tasks that it's good at is probably going to be 5, 6, 7 times as fast as what you're going to be doing if you're trying to do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm talking about legal research and writing. I'm talking about discovery requests, drafting letters, completing strategic analysis, outlining meetings, capturing conversations. I use it to negotiate. I mean, I found myself negotiating with a landlord and we had a disagreement as to how a particular term should be structured. So I said, look, let's just get on and share a Zoom screen and we'll talk to artificial intelligence together as to what's reasonable. And so collectively, we had a conversation together with a computer. And all of a sudden, the landlord said, wow, Adam, I guess I see it your way. That does seem pretty reasonable. So
Wow.
The use cases for artificial intelligence are amazing. It's also a level playing field leveler. It levels the playing field because it allows me to take an entry level attorney that may or may not have any experience in a particular area and give them all sorts of insight, wisdom, ideas, suggestions, data, vocabulary, recommendations for places to look next. The kind of thing that you would have to walk down the hall in a large law firm and get from a senior partner, you can now get from turning to the computer. And a lot of people are going to say, well, how can you trust it? Well, as lawyers, we're trained on doing due diligence. If you aren't comfortable with the first answer you get a second source, verify it. Take the answer that you've gotten and call a CPA. Take the answer that you've gotten and call a banker. Get online and do additional research. Go to Westlaw, go to Lexis. So you don't start with your immediate answer that it gives you, but if you use it strategically, it's going to save you an immense amount of time. One other couple quick things that I would say about artificial intelligence. Number one, is it going to replace humans? And the answer is no, it's not going to replace humans, but artificial intelligence is going to change the way work is done. And lawyers that use artificial intelligence well are going to replace lawyers who don't. So there's still a role for people, but just like any other new technological innovation, people that master it are going to have a competitive advantage over other people. And then the other thing is I hear people saying, well, Adam, but doesn't artificial intelligence make mistakes? And I say, yeah, my assumption, and I teach my team, let's just assume it's only going to be 80% accurate, but it's going to be 10 times as fast. So I get 10 times as fast and I get 80% accuracy, which turns out to be about no better than I get from an associate. So my goodness, why wouldn't I want to go with 10 times as fast, a fraction of the cost, and just about as good as an associate?
Are there ways, so I guess the first part of my question is, how do you keep on top of what's happening with artificial intelligence and the law is my first question. And my second question is, what do you do with all that information?
Yeah, so we saw this trend coming as a firm, and so I've taken my entire team. So the lawyers that you've heard me describe, and also our extended administrative team, and I've sort of said, if you want to be part of Rose Law Firm, you're going to embrace the artificial intelligence revolution. And so we're committed enough to it that we've taken all of the artificial intelligence platforms that we work with, and we've given them all names. So ChatGPT is George. We use Net Documents, we call that Nancy. We use Lexis, that's Larry. We use Precision from Westlaw, that's Peter. So the idea is that we develop relationships with this artificial intelligence. And I found that has been successful in encouraging all of our team members to really get a hold of learning it for themselves. Sharing with the team best use cases and best practices for where, when, and how to use the tools. So it's all kind of created an opportunity for me and for our firm to now be expanding, into a consulting and thought leadership practice around how to successfully incorporate technology into the legal marketplace. So we are now finding ourselves offering consulting and strategic advice to other lawyers and other law firms that see the huge opportunity that exists, but aren't quite sure how to take that next step.
Outside of AI, how have you used technology to help scale your law firm?
So we were actively engaging with contract lawyers long before COVID, but when COVID showed up, our office was 4,200 square feet in size. And with COVID, we immediately found ourselves having to downsize because we had two people coming into the office every day into this enormous space. So fortunately for us, we only had 9 months left on our sublease when COVID hit. So we were able to back out of that pretty quickly. And we've now pivoted to where we are, I would say, a 98% virtual firm with attorneys that work for the firm from all over the US, thanks to the Hire and Esquire platform. So we are about 10 attorneys. We're 98% virtual. I hire attorneys from around the US. If they turn out to be great relationships, I invite them to join the bar in Oregon. And so we're basically growing members of the Oregon State Bar and serving clients in Oregon with attorneys from around the country with lots of different expertise and disciplines. I think it's been a huge competitive advantage for me to be able to sort of build out and round out a team with quality talent, with lawyers who would have never otherwise been offering their services in Oregon.
And I think one of the things that we've seen from working with you over almost a decade now, if you can believe it, is the way that you've engaged contract attorneys has shown a real creativity and entrepreneurship that we don't see from a lot of other law firms. So just in terms of, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about sometimes the way that you've found attorneys with really niche, specific experience and then secured the client work, so you've really created a way to be able to make sure that you're not over hiring and then scrambling to create billable work for these hires, but the system that you've put together is really smart, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, so I kind of developed it and learned it on the fly, right? Like I think that I kind of grew up as Hire and Esquire grew up. And so, there's kind of been a back and forth where we've learned from each other. But what I discovered, and this makes sense, is that contract lawyers don't want to pay attention to me unless I've got work to give them. So there's this chicken and an egg where you want to create the relationship, you want to memorialize what the terms of that relationship are going to be before you need the work. Because if I'm going to go out and sell the service in the marketplace to my clients, I have to have confidence that I've got the skill set, the legal acumen, and I've already pre-negotiated economic terms that mean that there's profit margin built in. And I want to get all of that in place before I sell the engagement to the client. On the other hand, the contract lawyer doesn't want to talk to me and give me the time of day until I've got work for them to do. So there is this chicken and an egg thing. And so back to knowing who you are as a firm, I found that it was really helpful in all aspects of my business to know what kind of law firm am I. And so when I began the practice of law, and this is not my term, but other people have used this, I practiced door law. So door law means if it comes in the door, you're thankful for it and you do it. So one day I'm doing estate planning and the next day it's real estate and then it's corporate and employment. And I'm not being judicious in selecting cases that are, appropriate for me. I'm just thankful somebody wants to hire me to do something. But that's going to really hurt you in the long run because you're not going to be able to develop efficiencies. You're not going to be able to staff appropriately. So as I was able to mature the firm, I had to make hard decisions. What kind of firm do we want to be? What are the choices that we're going to make? And then that informs everything else that I have done along the way. So once I knew that I was going to be serving successful companies worth $10 to $50 million, focusing on corporate and commercial issues, both transactions and litigation, that told me I had to develop a certain level of sophisticated legal support to be part of my team. And it also helped me understand I couldn't be looking for a contract lawyer that wanted to work on nights and weekends because I have demanding clients and they have high demands from me and they expect me to respond within 24 hours or less. So I need to find contract lawyers that were willing and excited to help me serve clients in the way that I needed to serve them. So this forced me to segment the different types of contract lawyers in the marketplace. I don't want a retired contract lawyer who's fitting me in between rounds of golf. I don't want somebody else who's got a full-time job. The ideal contract lawyer for me is somebody else who's practicing in a 1 to 2 attorney small firm. They're only about 50% as busy as they would like to be. They're typically at their computer all day long, just like I am, and they're willing to be flexible to work and practice on Pacific time. And so when you are able to know who you are, know what your clients expect, it helps you define what you need to demand and expect from the people that work for you. It also obviously informs the type of and caliber of experience and talent that I need. So those clients are looking for an alternative to the large giant law firms. They don't like the idea of paying, $800 to $1,200 an hour, but they're willing to pay real money. So I need to be willing to meet their reasonable expectations and their reasonable demands. And that means I need to have lawyers already lined up, ready to work with us and on our team. So how do I do that? I do a multiple step negotiation. So I find the potential talent on your platform with creative job descriptions. And I try and talk about what it is that I'm able to offer to that target contract attorney that I know I'm interested in talking to. One of my best hiring techniques is to say, anticipated to be 20 plus hours a month of work. So I don't have the job today, but I'm calibrating the expectation of what the workflow might be in the future. So that's starting to screen people when they see my job advertisement. The second thing is when I start to get on the phone call or a Zoom call with them, actually a Zoom call is way better. I don't come in and act like I've never done this before. I mean, when I was doing this for the first or second time, I would spend an inordinate amount of time negotiating the terms of the relationship. And things got way better for me when I said, I do this a lot. Here's what it looks like. Here's what I expect. This is what your role will be. This is where you'll fit in. This is how I will pay you. This is what I'm paying for. This is what I'm not paying for. How does that sound? And as long as that's consistent with the job posting that I've put up, most people said, great, let's do it. I send a non-binding term sheet. I say, this is what you can expect. I ask them to sign the non-binding term sheet. I'm just calibrating their expectations. Now that everybody has the same expectations, no surprises, introduce them to what our firm's systems are, how we use Zoom, how we use file and document management systems. Am I giving them an email address to represent the firm? Will they appear on our website? All of this stuff is dialed in, thought through, scripted out in our term sheet. They come and they spend a little bit of time interacting with the team. If they like us, we get to determine we like them. Then and only then do we present them with a formal contract lawyer services agreement, which sort of said, we'd like you to sign this. This is going to be a contractually binding document that we will rely on and look back on as, a memorialization of our agreement. But when I got to the point of systematizing our onboarding process like that, I've saved so much time. I'm not reinventing the wheel on every new engagement. And again, I talked about Patrick Lencioni, humble, hungry, and smart. And when I find people that match the humble, hungry, and smart, they typically are going to sense that what I'm doing is thought through. It makes sense. They're excited to be part of our team. They like the idea of being able to work remotely from wherever they are, and they want to be part of something that's successful. I've not had to get into the weeds and negotiate every single clause in my contract like I was having to do 7 or 8 years ago. One thing that's been really helpful for me in doing that is to understand exactly what I want. That's what we just talked about. But it's also been really useful for me to understand what the contract lawyer wants and to recognize that there is room for more than one type of contract lawyer on my team. So we have segmented the types of lawyers we're looking for. We have integrated lawyers. Integrated lawyers, everybody is a 1099 that we work with on Hire and Esquire, but an integrated lawyer kind of looks like our firm. They're probably getting 70% of their work from us. Now, 30% of their work is their own clients. But if they're getting 70% of their work from us, they know all of our administrative team members. They know our billing systems and functions. They're cooperating with our marketing functions. They have no problem thinking of themselves as part of the Rose Law Firm. Those are our integrated lawyers. Then I have the extended lawyers. The extended lawyers get on a Zoom call with us 1 or 2 times a month. It's entirely optional, but people that want to get work from Rose Law Firm know that they need to show up at those meetings. And so every other Wednesday for 30 minutes, we invite our entire network of attorneys to come join us online. And when a contract lawyer shows up at that meeting once or twice a month, I know they've got capacity in their schedule. They're kind of signaling to us, hey, I'd like work. They're also signaling to us that they're willing to invest in being part of our extended network. So those extended attorneys don't need to know all about our systems. They can rely more heavily on our administrative team members, but they do have to have sort of an understanding and awareness of where they fit within the Rose Law Firm ecosystem and a desire to be valuable. Our third category is a subject matter attorney. These are attorneys typically that have a deep dive area of expertise: corporate tax, ERISA, patent, antitrust, an ESOP lawyer, an FTC lawyer. These lawyers have their own practice. They have a niche area of expertise. They really don't care about our firm at all. They don't care about our website. They don't care about our administrative team. They're not going to use our email address. They certainly aren't going to save their work product into our online digital filing system. They're simply going to be outside offering their excellent deep dive, very helpful, very important area of expertise. And they're going to bring it in, let's call it 3 or 4 times a year when one of the other lawyers on our team needs their expertise. So integrated, boy, they really know everything that's going on at the firm. Extended, they have their own firm, dual loyalties, but they're excited to see themselves as part of the extended Rose Law Firm team. Subject matter attorneys, they don't think of themselves as Rose Law Firm attorneys at all, but they think of us as an occasional source of work.
I spoke to an attorney the other day. He's he's got about 5, 6 years experience out of law school, is thinking about starting his own law firm. If you could go back, if you could speak to this attorney, or if you could go back and sort of speak to yourself when you decided to start your own firm, what would you do differently? What are the things that you would focus on?
Boy, 5 to 6 years of experience. So my career track was that I spent 7 years as an associate. I started my own firm. I did that for 3 years, kind of smelled the economy turning south in 2007, joined a large law firm, spent the recession, of 2007, 8, 9, 10, kind of in there, in the relative safety of a large firm where I was a corporate legal partner, and then left there in 2012 to start and run my own firm again. So, when you talk about what would I advise somebody to do with 5 to 6 years of experience, I'm reflecting on my first time of starting a law firm.
Hmm.
And so the advice that I would have for that person is don't do it. I think 5 to 6 years of experience is not yet enough to really, kind of have gotten your career to the place where you can put it on autopilot. I think that a lawyer with only 5 to 6 years of experience, if you have the opportunity to continue to get trained, to be paid by somebody else, to learn new systems from somebody else, to build relationships with centers of influence in the marketplace, I think 5 to 6 years is not an ideal time to do this. If I could fast forward to the second time that I did this, so I now had 15 years of experience, I think that was an ideal time to step out on my own. So I'd had lots of training, lots of experience. I knew what I knew. I knew the type of firm that I wanted to be. So my advice to that person is take a bit more time and be more prepared. So have a little bit more money in reserve, create that business plan. How many times in this interview have I emphasized the importance of knowing what kind of firm you want, who you want your target client to be? Be thoughtful about that. Don't just have it in your head, but put it in writing. So everybody's got their 1,800 to 2,200 billable hour a year expectation. Well, kind of slough on it in your last year. In your last year at the firm, do an extra 200 hours less, and take that extra time to kind of be putting your own thoughts into paper. I'm not saying you're competing with your firm. I'm not saying you're stealing clients from the firm. I'm just saying you're clear for yourself on what you will do when you're no longer working for your law firm. So I would definitely take more time, better understand what you're going to need to do to run a business in addition to practicing law. Kind of think through where am I going to be located? Do I have a computer? What is my website going to look like? There's all sorts of things that you can legally do ahead of time. And I would say get as many of those things done before you actually announce you're leaving and setting up your own shop.
Looking, towards the future of the legal industry and all of the change that's happening, and you don't have to, but do you have any sort of like thoughts or predictions about where things are going and what's going to be changing over the next, 12, 24, 36 months?
Yeah, so we've already talked a lot about artificial intelligence. I think that that's going to take over the legal industry just like it's taking over everywhere. So I think that lawyers that don't get ahead of that, it's going to get ahead of them and it's going to find themselves being left in the dust. So I think artificial intelligence is one huge dynamic. Another thing for me is that, clients don't care about meeting in person anymore. So, sort of the remote dynamic of meeting with your attorney by Teams, by Zoom, by, Google Meet, this is going to change all sorts of dynamics. And I think it's going to put increasing pressure on the multi-jurisdictional practice of law, where more and more state bar regulators are going to have to acknowledge that really, their insistence on being licensed in the state bar is kind of a way to keep competition out or to let more lawyers come into the state. And you routinely see state bars that feel like they need more lawyers are loosening their restrictions, and state bars that feel like they have too many lawyers are tightening their restrictions. It's not about knowledge or ability to serve the client once you get past a minimum level of competence. It's really about how you keep out the competition. And I think that technology is just going to change those dynamics, and you're going to having increased pressure to loosen the restrictions that have historically existed on the multi-jurisdictional practice of law. And I would say that again, technology. So technology is not just about ChatGPT, right? Every software tool out there is developing their own artificial intelligence expertise.
Mhm.
And the corollary here is that the importance of people that know how to use that technology, often younger attorneys, is going to progress much faster than it historically has been. So you're going to see senior lawyers that are going to find their skill set outmoded faster, and you're going to see junior lawyers that learn how to use artificial intelligence appropriately are going to be able to catapult their careers. So I think it is going to shake up sort of a traditional lockstep career progression. I think as I think about for myself for the next 10 years, I'm kind of excited about the model that I've built. And I think that it's going to be a competitive advantage for some law firm. Some large law firm is going to say, wow, we want to buy that. We want
Mm.
what Rose Law Firm has built. And we think it could be an incredible competitive advantage for us to take as a bolt on or an add on to the bricks and mortar law firm that we have historically been running. So I think that over time, there will be lots of small firms like mine that are doing something very similar. And I think you're going to see a dynamic where the established law firms are going to say, wow, we need that. We have no idea how to build that. We're going to buy that.